Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast, where I interview Treasury professionals about their Treasury careers. Each and every week, I talk to them about how they've built their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the Treasury profession going to next. Let's get on with the show. In this week's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Jan Beukes, the Group Treasurer at MultiChoice Group. MultiChoice is Africa's leading entertainment company. They create and secure the rights to amazing content from all over the world, and it goes direct to TV, home, digital TV, and everything else, and online video services. Basically, I'm going to get Jan to explain that right the way through, because really interesting group, and he's got a really fascinating career. And as we were just talking about, a bit of an unconventional path within Treasury. So let's get straight into it. Jan, tell us about your career to date and how you first, discovered finance and then Treasury. So over to you, sir, as always.
Yes, I'm Mike, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
I definitely had a bit of an unconventional route getting into Treasury. I finished off my articles. I am a qualified chartered accountant by trade as well. At the end of my articles, career, I did not necessarily wanted to stay within audit, but an opportunity came across my path to join a company called AFCRI within the heading up the kind of smaller internal audit team at the stage. And, so I jumped at the opportunity. And in hindsight, I would say the 2 years that I spent within internal audit was actually a blessing in disguise. I managed to get to know the entire group. I got to know pretty much everybody within the organization. So my initial doubts about the opportunity, quickly got vanquished, if I can put it like that. You got the complete spectrum of the entire group, and you got to meet people, and people got to meet you. And, one thing that I will say, on the outset of this chat is I've always had a mindset in terms of making sure I get involved in things that's not necessarily, part of just your normal day job. Yeah. So while within internal audit, my boss at that stage also looked after the corporate finance M&A side of the business. And, as soon as he was busy with something else, I always reached out and, tried to, can I assist with anything? Or, can he basically give me feedback in terms of, what they are doing and what they're busy with. And, that's how I got the exposure at the end of the day to the M&A side. So after 2 years of internal audit, got an opportunity to join on the corporate finance side, working closely with him, and stayed within that function for the next 4 years. Ended up running it for 2 years.
Just so that people understand, AFCRI itself, just as a group, again, people might not understand that. So can you just outline who they are? Because again, that really affects, it's some interesting moves, sort of thing. AFCRI to MultiChoice, not the usual moves. But go back to you, sir.
So AFCRI is an agricultural company focusing within agri and foods business. So your storage of grain in silos all the way to animal feeds, the mechanization side. AFCRI was an agent for John Deere, selling all those high-tech instruments to farmers. There was a farmer financing side to the business, so heavily focused within the agri space, the food space, which was a fantastic experience to go through in terms of, everything that impacts the business. So watching closely, weather patterns, being cognizant of, when there's going to be a good harvest and a bad harvest, and how international grain prices and soya prices moves and impacts the business. So there were so many interlinking aspects of that business to kind of get used to and to learn over time.
Yeah, a different, more rounded sort of finance role rather than just do the accounts and everything else. We talked about this on the pre-show when we did a pre-podcast and discussed that. Some people just go in, do your audit, maybe qualify, and then here are the books, do this. But you were actually involved in the operation, and that's how then your other roles evolved, wasn't it?
So after finishing on the internal audit side, then getting involved on the corporate finance, M&A side of things, which was obviously very specialized. It was a kind of a brand new field to engage in and upskill yourself. There's a very big difference in terms of, what you learn on, valuations while you're studying versus, actually doing it as part of the M&A transaction having those discussions between parties. So that was a fantastic experience to go through. And as part of the kind of 4 years within M&A, that's where the first exposure and engagement with banks came in. So as part of these transactions, there were normally some sort of facility involved. I will never forget the first meeting where I sat and the treasurer at that stage, we were meeting with one of the banks, and the banks asked him, "Can you please send us a copy of your covenant register?" And I just thought to myself, what are they talking about? What is this? And that's kind of where the interest got sparked. As part of that entire M&A cycle, it was important for me to get a better understanding of how banks look at these. What's the key metrics within the business when they look at funding and all of those things. And then closer to the end of my 4-year stint within the M&A side of the business, we went through a patch where there wasn't a dedicated treasurer at AFCRI at that stage. There was an operations team that managed the day-to-day functionality. And my boss at that stage, who was the CEO of the group, we were looking at something, and I basically reached out to him and said, "I'm more than happy to assist you with any of the treasury things if you've got capacity issues." So I've had a little bit of experience as part of the kind of the M&A team in terms of what goes into these term sheets and all of that. I think it was probably a week later, he called me and said, "Listen, would I be willing to look after the group treasury function for him?" Just by nature, I jumped at the opportunity. My mind, and we'll probably kind of get that to it later, but my mind is of such, I enjoy having a job where every day is different. So kind of getting into treasury offered that opportunity. Now you go from an M&A type business where obviously a lot of what you're doing is confidential. Yes, you engage with certain people, and then you go into a treasury function where you've got a much wider, bigger team to manage. All of a sudden, you engage across the business again. Became very quickly a function of me upskilling myself because there wasn't anybody to formally hand over or guide me. Get to know the operations team a lot better very quickly, and start focusing on the key touch points from a treasury point for the business units as well.
What was treasury like there? What was the complexity of treasury? Because I know that then your role grew and grew as you guys sort of evolved. How did that then come about? Because I think that was interesting how it developed, if that's the right way.
You sit with so many different business units that brings a lot of different funding requirements that you need to look at. So there was a big portion of, especially I would say that, the kind of first year of that 5-year period was just understanding, those funding requirements and the various cycles. Agriculture, between the mechanization and the foods businesses, there's different cycles, and at different periods in the year, there's various levels of, funding requirements, and how do you get visibility of all of that and bring it all together. It was definitely a tough learning environment to quickly get your head around that ask and what's required. And with that, the other fun part of treasury is obviously dealing with people and dealing with personalities. As a fairly young person in a senior role, you have to build that emotional intelligence in dealing with the difficult customers. So it's something that's over the past 8 years of my treasury career, having that ability to not just manage your own team, but also, how to engage with different customers in your business unit, and how you get communication across to them, and, get what's their need, and, how you can fill that gap and get alignment. That's definitely a skill that's, possibly not always talked about, but it's so crucial and core to the overall role of, being a group treasurer.
Yeah. And then your role sort of grew and grew, and, you were then advanced your career. That's probably the best way. You sort of stepped up and stepped up. Maybe talk about that, if you would, to us, because, you went from this sort of financing role to the real leadership treasurer role. What was that like? Was your head spinning a bit, or what was that like?
The key thing during that whole transition stage was just to, ask as many questions as I could. make sure that I've got adequate knowledge on topics, that if somebody did have any questions, that I've got the ability to answer. So the last thing you want to do is sit in a senior management meeting and get a question, and you sit there and you don't really have anything that you can say or add. So very quickly, focus turned in, kind of upskilling myself on that basis, making sure that you fully understand, the industry at that stage. AFCRI's specific needs and asks becomes an on-the-job thing where you then just grow your overall knowledge base and what you know. Obviously, engagement with banks is critical, and it will always remain a critical aspect, but making sure that not just your relationship manager, but the credit team, especially at banks, understand what your business is about, what's your needs, how should they view the business, to give them that comfort, and that just makes for easier discussions when you do meet with them. So I went through a 5-year journey from basically getting a job where I had limited experience to the end of year 5, where I've managed to get a much better understanding of what's happening and what's required, where the focus should be. But I also reached a stage in my career where I felt I need to move on now. I've reached a bit of a ceiling in terms of what I can contribute and learn at AFCRI at that stage, and I will forever be grateful in terms for my 11 years at the company and the opportunities that was given to me. That's when I made the decision to have a look at something else.
It came about though a little bit curiously, didn't it? With you change things a little bit on your profile or various other bits. So because I thought that was an interesting sort of mini nugget, for people listening today, because we talk about LinkedIn is a professional network. It's not just about getting jobs, but although this flies in the face a little bit, explain that a little bit if you would.
At that stage, I was using LinkedIn, I think like anybody else, but nothing too significant. I had a profile, a little bit about myself, but when I made the decision to look for other opportunities, I didn't limit it just to South Africa. Effectively, had a view for broader international opportunities possibly. So I reached out to a lady in the US on how things work there, what's the kind of documentation, how do people present, all of that. And that got us to the topic of executive resumes. So, within South Africa, we've got your normal CVs and all of that. And she very quickly, when I sent through my documents and everything that I updated, she says, we don't use that. Yeah, it's a 2-pager executive resume, and the focus is purely on what value did you add to the company over your career? Be specific. How did it impact the financial results of a company? And that's where the focus is. Nobody is interested in terms of, what were all the list of activities and responsibilities that you had. They want to know what value did you add to a company. So I went through a complete reflection process to update that, construct that document, which forces you to sit back and really think about, what you did over your career. Then that formed the basis of a complete rewrite and updating of my LinkedIn profile. That effectively resulted in 2 things. So for one, it forever changed the way that I think about my job that I've got, making sure that you maintain that value add mindset in everything that you do. You're not just going through the mechanics every day and just getting things done, which was super important for me. And I wish actually, these 2-page executive resumes become a worldwide standard, because it's the quickest way to get a sense of who you are dealing with and what achievements, this person has or her had within their career. The day that I made my new profile live, the next day a recruiter in Cape Town contacted me for the job that was available at MultiChoice. At that stage, MultiChoice was still part of Naspers. A lot of people will also know them from Proces. It was listed a few years back in the Netherlands. But MultiChoice on its own was a massive opportunity, and it's a big business. The company, we've got presence across 50 markets in Africa. We've got a technology company, Arteto, which is headquartered in Amsterdam with footprint in various continents. So they focus on, more connected security, Internet of Things scope. So, it's It's not directly linked to kind of the pay TV, online, data consumption side of the business. So just the sheer scope in opportunity and size of the company obviously made it a very exciting opportunity to pursue.
Yeah.
Went through the first interview. I thought it went okay. Being interviewed, I think there was 4 or 5 people, including the group treasurer of Naspers was involved. Then got a call back for a second interview, which was with the CFO at that stage, as well as one of the HR business partners. I think it was a few days after that I got a call in. They would like to offer the position to me. And for me, it was a no-brainer. So as much it was sad to say goodbye to AFCRI and everything that and got comfortable with over an 11 period, I reminded myself that nothing great comes from staying in your comfort zone. So accepted the position, joined in March 2018. So it's been just over 3 years now, and it's been a fantastic journey.
Let's talk through that journey. Again, for people listening today, they might be in a similar situation. They're about to start a new role or recently started it. What was the state of Treasury there? I mean, this is a loaded question because we've already had this call and I know this, so I'm totally leading my interviewee. So poor Jan's like, well, we've already talked about this, Mike. But I think it was really, again, a nice thing to pick out that I think that, the way you grew it and your ethos around people as well. But back to you as always. I'll shut up and let you talk. Carry on, sir.
It was already an established treasury function within MultiChoice. A lot have been put in place when I joined. I would say the biggest thing for me was to give myself time to fully understand the business. It obviously was way more significant in scope than what I had exposure to previously, what I had to deal with. So allowing myself enough time to get to know the business, the various people that are involved, and everything that is treasury related that we had to look at and manage. And as part of that was once you get your mind wrapped around that, then first you're really in a position to sit back and say, okay, well, where are some of the gaps or where are some of the, opportunities? Where can we optimize things a bit better? And, effectively we started with a 2.5 year, call it tech optimization drive. During that stage, MultiChoice unbundled from Naspers, so we had to deal with that, which was a significant project on its own, for which we managed to win an Adam Smith Treasury Award as well, which we are very, very proud of. My sole focus was we need to make sure that there's visibility. Anybody in Treasury will tell you that forecasting, cash visibility, having quick, accurate access to data is golden.
Yeah.
To limit the amount of manual exercises. So, we made use of a lot of Excel, and Excel is great for many things, but it can only take you to a certain point. So, really focused on, where we could optimize. And it didn't become an exercise just of telling our executives, we would like X, Y, and Z. It was more a function, guys who would really like to do X because this is the value that it will add.
What I want to do is, and again, we talked about this before, and we look about the difference. You've come from industrial services, an industrial company, to digital, to entertainment company and things. You had similar checklists we talked about. You touched on it there, the visibility of cash. This is your sort of, again, with some of the listeners when they're going into new roles or thinking, right, I need to do a review. What are the top 2 or 3 or 5 things? The visibility of cash is obviously key. What did you find perhaps the difference in industry was, there must be different drivers, supply chain and everything else. What was the contrast making the move? Yeah. And then what were the commonalities, if you like? So maybe what were the real differences that you noticed and then actually, this is exactly the same?
I would say in terms of comparing AFCRI to MultiChoice, except for completely different industry, going from agri and foods to media, pay TV, that spectrum, obviously that was a significant change on its own. I am a bit of a techie at heart in terms of enjoying these type of things. So the MultiChoice fit became very natural for me.
Yeah. Dealing
with such a big business, the scope of FX exposures and what we had to manage was way more significant than what I had to do previously. Coupled with that, a lot more people engagement. So I would say in terms of comparing the two entities, everything went around scope. Everything was just so much bigger. It's so much more that you had to get to learn and had to get comfortable with. So that formed the basis of getting comfortable with that, and then you start with the next step. So in terms of commonalities, accurate forecasting, and you'll find that in any business. I don't think that will ever disappear.
Yeah, that's the commonality.
It will ever be, it will remain critical. The extent of, FX exposures that we have to manage, that was definitely something new that I had to get accustomed with and get comfortable with. Then obviously within such a big organization, getting to grips with your governance structures, your relationships with central banks, being in so many markets. So all of a sudden you deal with multiple exchange controls. It's not just, the South African Reserve Bank anymore. So, just kind of coming back to that initial statement, just the scope of everything changed. Yes, there was similarities and commonalities from a treasury concept perspective, but your knowledge in terms of, what you need to know and be on top of, just multiplied by factors.
We spoke before about your team and the people and the way that you coach and manage and things like that. Can you give us a sort of a flavor for that as well?
We run a centralized treasury, including myself, with a team of seven people. I think something that's since day one that I recognized as a challenge within treasury teams, being so specialized and sometimes small, is, how can you give your members of your team, how can you give them exposure to the entire treasury value chain, if you want to put it like that, over time? Now, when I joined, we had a very much your traditional front, middle, back office structure within treasury. It was difficult to give everybody exposure to different areas. So effectively redesigned the treasury structure. So obviously, I'm the head of treasury, and right now we've got a team that focuses just on cash and liquidity management. And we've got a separate team that only focus on financial risk management, so FX and everything related to that. So I've got two direct senior treasury analysts that reports to me, and they both have two individuals supporting them. And over and above that, I implemented a rotational structure. So the senior guys effectively rotate every year, while their support team members rotates every 2 years. So it just became a natural kind of conclusion for me. This is a fantastic way to, over time, give these guys exposure to, everything that's, that it is towards MultiChoice Treasury. And, as the maturity grows and people's knowledge and exposure on these specific items, grow, I can then incorporate the senior guys into more of the projects that I get to deal with and give them exposure on that end. Because at the end of the day, you want your people to grow. You want to keep their interactions and their experience at work and of a nature where they feel that they're growing. So they don't get bored, which is very important, because as soon as people get bored, they are going to leave. I think it's inherent to human nature. And make sure that we're now in a position to give these guys very focused and specific training. So whatever we put them on, make sure it adds not just value to their lives, but then also has the future value for the business. So really making sure that you engage with your team, make sure that you, as a manager, you know exactly what their needs are, what do they require to function and do their jobs, and really listen to it and do something about it. Because I often tell my guys, there's no superstars within MultiChoice Treasury. The Treasury works because the entire team works. Everybody has a platform and an opportunity to give their voice and their opinion. So candor is a very big thing for me. People must be given that opportunity to give their view and opinion without fear. As soon as you enter an arena where people are too afraid to ask something or to speak, there's just no benefit around it. So, even if they're just comfortable to do it within a treasury space, I at least, want to give them that opportunity, get used to the type of conversations. If we need to have a hard conversation on a topic, then we've got it. But the the team knows that it never gets personal. And that's where you unlock value. From my perspective, it's also just remain humble. You're never going to know everything that there is to know about Treasury. So make sure that you learn from your peers. You can learn from your own staff. Make sure that you know what's kind of new requirements, how the industry is evolving, and just continue learning and make yourself open to gain knowledge.
We spoke about this before, and I made some further notes. I was just looking through them, and I think there's some terrible byproducts as a recruiter, I would say, that they're from this. And we did discuss it a bit before, but it sort of came back to me, and we were just looking back through here. And some of the bits I noted afterwards, and we perhaps didn't talk on our pre-podcast call, but a byproduct of what Jan's doing with his rotation program and everything else is a lack of recruitment needs. As a recruiter, I've got kids that need shoes, all right? So, we need to keep that going. But joking aside, because you were incentivizing and leading those guys, through the path, you're getting greater in-depth knowledge. Again, there's people are enjoying their jobs more, but you're retaining that knowledge for the group. And we'll talk about this in a minute as we move in the future of Treasury. But you've had all those. Are there any other benefits you've seen, or what other things do you think when you look at your team now, that where do they go from here, or how does it keep on evolving?
I think, from implementing that structure to another thing that I'm very passionate about is not to micromanage. I don't like to be micromanaged, and I don't like to micromanage. So I think as soon as you allow your staff the freedom to do what they need to do, and also give them, that sense that you trust them and they're going to deliver. Very importantly, make sure exactly that they know what is expected and when it's expected. I mean, there's so much benefits in terms of, just seeing people grow, getting that confidence. You end up with a team where people are not constantly coming back and saying, is this okay? I've done this. Yes, you can still provide guidance when required, but the level of kind of, maturity and growth potential that you give people and not micromanaging them. I mean, it's just so vast. Yes, I would like to retain my team, and I'll do anything that I can to make sure that they get opportunities. But my team also knows that if there's ever anything that comes across their path that looks quite interesting for them to pursue, or if they feel that that's a direction they want to go into, they've got my full blessing. I will only back them, whatever that might be. So it's that sense of, yes, we're a bunch of guys working together in a corporate structure, but you get a lot more kind of personal and close over time. I mean, there's only benefits around it.
And Jan, we've talked, bringing us more sort of to the present day, if you like. We've been before COVID, during COVID, and heading out of it and things like that. We're still different states and things. You're based in South Africa, so you guys are coming through it as well and stuff. But without the pandemic anyway, you've always had these local challenges and things like that. How have you, what's your ethos, around coping with it, all of this stuff? How's that affected you, sort of thing? What's the, the general thoughts from you, really?
I would say we are in the fortunate position of, working in Africa. The one thing that Africa will do, especially from a treasury perspective, is keep you humble. There's always, something happening. There's always a challenge that you need to get a solution to. Kind of looking at that, a big focus on my end, it's always been, just make sure that you're prepared. Make sure that you know exactly not just what's happening within your markets, know exactly what's available to you. Just as an example, in terms of liquidity investment products, what type of FX instruments are available in all of these markets. Make sure that you're in a position where if you need to make a decision, that you already have all the tools and knowledge that you need to execute quite quickly on that. So having that preparation, constant finger on the pulse mindset, I think, prepared us quite well for COVID. So from a treasury perspective, I think we were quite comfortable in what we needed to do. Yes, there were certain areas where you may have, intensified, just existing exercises on our end. You weren't kind of caught off guard and you didn't know how to deal with this. I think as with many other corporates, the only challenge was just the initial work from home scenario and setup, making sure that, everybody can function, everybody's comfortable. Having gone through a hard lockdown where you almost can't leave your house, making sure that from a kind of an emotional standpoint, that everybody is doing well and coping. So, I think we've gone through this pandemic quite well. We've been working from home now for a year already. We maintained the levels and the standards that we set out. We still executed on all our projects. And then that just comes back to preparation, effective communication, making sure that everybody knows exactly what they need to do. And then you end up with something that you can manage. And then you just prioritize, whatever is most urgent. Prioritize, focus on that, make sure that you deliver it, and then you go on to the next thing. So you can very quickly become overwhelmed. You just kind of pile everything on. So just make sure that, every now and then just break it down into smaller components and just continue to deliver, and then you should be fine.
Before we reach the end of today's, and again, we'll put your LinkedIn details and get your top 3 tips shortly. But as we come out of this, where do you see things, or, what are your... Again, we spoke about this before the show, but what are you thinking is next? What are your plans for the future, and how do you see things? You talked about their technology, or what are you? Again, we sometimes talk about CFOs saying, "Can you deal with this? Can you deal with this?" Obviously, it's been a weird world, and we had business coping, not business as usual. Then a bit more business as usual. Now we're looking at the future and things. What's rising to the top of your mind, if you like, as a treasurer? That's the right way to ask it.
I think the accuracy of data, getting it better forecasting, quicker forecasting. So, linking that with things like, machine learning, AI, obviously topics that people are well accustomed to. But for me, treasury is specific. I think as a treasurer, you should definitely have a sound knowledge around things like machine learning. I don't think you necessarily have to be an expert in the field. There's people that dedicate their careers to that. But you should at least be able to have an intelligent conversation with somebody that, does specialize within it. Obviously, as from a treasury perspective, we know our data, we know what's available, where's the kind of difficult portions around it, and, having that insight, and also then, having this kind of basic understanding on, how machine learning works, and, how these models are built and what they rely on, what data structures, etc. I think, there's a lot of value in it. It is something that I'm currently focusing on personally as well, in just, upskilling myself within that field. But, if I stand back, just the access to technology, it's just becoming, just easier and easier and easier over time. So, making sure that you incorporate that within your function, is definitely a must-have. On the back of that, I will always be cognizant of a very basic rule: garbage in, garbage out. So make sure that you still have, those principles in place within Treasury, within business, and that alignment to give you the best possible, data to work with, and then you can harness the benefits of, all these technological advancements. So I think, definitely it's just gonna increase, in importance over time.
As we approach the end of today's show, that again, we had a conversation before and it was brilliant. I know that we keep our podcast to half an hour, 40 minutes, but we could literally keep talking about us. And I really enjoy it and our conversation. But as we approach the end of today's show, we'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But as you reflect back over the time, over the years, if you like, that you've been within Treasury, and then looking at the future, what sort of tips would you give to people, or what are your overall thoughts, as it were?
I would say, Mike, probably the most important for me is having a value and a service mindset. As a treasury function, as a predominantly a cost function in a lot of organizations, make sure that whatever you do, you add value, and understand where you can add value. If you end up with a treasury function that effectively pays for itself, every year, that's golden. So make sure that people within the business also fully understand where you can assist and what you can do for them, making their lives easier. That's where you get buy-in. It's not the silo approach of, do you just kind of running operations, every day. You need to have that ability to, get that complete view. That links into the engagement with business. You engage, you communicate, everybody has clarity on, what Treasury is focusing on, where we can deliver value add, what's their requirements, making sure that, the banks provide proper service to the group, so that you get the maximum efficiency out of them. And then probably the last point, touched on this in the beginning, it's been an element throughout my career is just, never stop being curious. Never stop learning. Continue to ask questions. Whenever I'm in a meeting and somebody tells me, sorry for asking this stupid question, the first thing I said is, there's no such thing. The only stupid thing you can do is not ask that question. So continue to ask and to understand. Venture out of your comfort zone. Venture outside of what you do on a day-to-day basis. That's how you get exposure. And you're going to land up with working on something that you really enjoy. If you can enjoy your job on a day-to-day basis, that's the best position you can end up with.
Amazing. And, just give and prove your value to your group, and at the same time, always embrace that curiosity. And I think I've heard that a number of times, but I really love your summary of that. That was amazing. Jan, thank you for your time today. So I know that we could keep talking, and there were so many bits in there I wanted to deep dive in, like LinkedIn and various bits, but I had to avoid it because I don't want to take up too much of your day, sir. I think, again, we'll put Jan's details in the show notes so you can connect with him. He's great to have in your network. Fantastic to have you on the show today. And thank you very much, sir.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, Mike. It's always great to share what you've learned, over time, and to provide feedback and to give back. And if it inspires only one person, then I'm happy.
Amazing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Hello, it's Mike here again. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. If you did, then maybe you want to follow the show or subscribe, depending on where you listen, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, or another great place to listen to the show from. It's totally free and means that you'll be the first to see each and every week when we release a new show. And maybe whilst you're there, you could even leave a quick review. Reviews and ratings are among the most important metrics for a podcast to effectively rank. And as you can probably appreciate, the podcast is a lot of hard work to produce every week. It'd be amazing. Just take, say, 20 seconds, leave a quick review of my amazing guests and their great career stories. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much, and I can't wait to see you soon.